Hey guys, today we're continuing on our blue exploration, but I want to talk about the Civil War today, which is my time period. I really do enjoy talking about it because it's probably one of the most misunderstood time periods in U.S. history. Most people assume the Civil War happened over slavery, but it happened more due to states' rights. And when you set up the Civil War, there's many factors you have to take in. For example, when we were setting up our nation, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Slavery is like a wolf. You have it by the foot and don't want to let go." He understood that this was a horrible institution, but he knew that if he eliminated it, it would destroy America. But there were those who pushed for the freedom of all slaves, including John Adams, George Washington, and Ben Franklin. Now, Washington did own slaves, but by his death, he'd freed all of his slaves because he didn't feel right owning other people. Washington died of blood poisoning. Now, Jefferson only freed about 50% of his slaves at most. He didn't free many of them. He used some of them to continue his lifestyle at Monticello, and he was even known to have had an affair with a slave, which caused a lot of historical controversy. Now fast forward to Andrew Jackson. When Jackson becomes president, even though he's from the South, he doesn't take the same stance as many do about slavery. He doesn't feel it's right, but he doesn't want to eliminate it because he knows that it will cause a rift between the North and the South, and he didn't want a civil war. So what Jackson does is he kind of ignores it. And then you have this tax he implements to try and help the poor white farmers. And this tax goes against cotton, which is something the South grows. And when this happens, South Carolina says, no, we're not going to collect the tax, which really annoys Jackson. Jackson's the president. He feels like he has the power to do this. So he turns around and threatens to hang some of the South Carolinian senators, and he also threatens to march on South Carolina to force them to collect the tax. Well, this is called the nullification crisis. South Carolina called for all southern states to secede with her, but none came to its aid. In fact, there's something called the Georgia Platform, which states, as long as slavery is not messed with by the northern states, the southern states are willing to stay in the Union. And they didn't agree with what South Carolina was doing, so Jackson ends up winning over the South Carolinians, and he actually comes out of the nullification crisis looking like a national hero. Now, fast forward to 1860. This is the election of Abraham Lincoln. Now, Lincoln never actually said in any of his speeches that he was going to free slaves. He hated slavery, but he did not want to free the slaves. He just wanted it to end somehow because he felt that he could understand them, coming from a very abusive household where he was, in fact, a white slave to his father. Lincoln was also friends with Dred Scott, who has the most famous case out of the Supreme Court dealing with slavery, Dred Scott v. Sanford, where Dred Scott sues for his freedom after his master had moved to a state where slaves were actually free. So he sues but loses the case, and when this happens, he will later on buy his freedom from the book he writes. But with this, the South feels like they're going to have slavery removed. So they start seceding. Now, interesting fact about Florida, which is the state I live in, Florida almost didn't secede from the Union. The vote was almost by 2 for them to stay. So they almost stayed in the Union, and also Tallahassee is the only capital west of the Mississippi not to be captured by Union troops. Now, there were Unionists in the South who believed that it could all work out, but most of the misconception with this comes from the fact that everybody thinks everybody in the South wanted to secede. No, that's not true. Most of the small white farmers resented slavery because it cost them more money because they couldn't keep up with the plantations. And because they couldn't keep up with the plantations, they couldn't earn the same amount of money that the plantation owners were. And they didn't want slavery. There's a movie that just came out, Freedom of Jonestown, I think it's called. That's a historically accurate movie. I didn't get to see it yet, but I've heard it's really, really good. But many white small planters did not want slavery to continue. Now, Abraham Lincoln comes in, he's elected, and then you have the South start to secede. Was it Lincoln's fault? No, because they misconstrued what Lincoln originally said he was going to do. And once the secession starts, you have the first shots of the Civil War fired in 1861 upon Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Now, Fort Sumter, nobody actually dies during this battle. The only thing that dies is a donkey because of a heart attack, which is kind of funny. Now, in the Civil War, studying it, there's always two names for every single battle. Whether it be Bull Run or Manassas, Antietam or Sharpsburg, they always have two names because you have the northern name and the southern name. Now, the first big battle of the Civil War, of course, is Bull Run to the north, Manassas to the south. It's called Bull Run in the north because there's a train head railroad nearby, and in the south it's called Manassas because of the creek that runs by it. And I've actually been there. It's really, really cool. But they thought it was going to be a very short war. In 1861, a lot of people just went out to watch the battle. They sent up their picnic baskets, and by the time the battle started, they thought it was going to be short. They thought the North was definitely going to win, but the South rallies and defeats the North, pushing them back. Now, the North is going to lose many battles, mainly because of who the general is, a man by the name of George McClellan. Now, McClellan is known as the Little Napoleon because he does have Napoleonic syndrome. He believes that he is better than he actually is. Focus. Let's see. There you go. He believes that he's better than he actually is. Oftentimes, he doesn't agree with Lincoln and leaves Lincoln sitting downstairs waiting for answers and refuses to even talk to Lincoln, so Lincoln will remove him. Now, my favorite general is actually Grant, who a lot of people vilify because they say he was a drunkard, he was a bloody murderer, but Grant probably was the opposite. Grant used to faint at the sight of blood. He was a very kind and generous man, and he always felt bad when he felt like he messed up, costing the lives of his troops, which the best example of that is going to be the Battle of Shiloh, where he comes into the battle. He was supposed to have a group come in with him, but they never showed. They were late, and he loses a lot of his men, and he is so distraught. But this is also the battle where the South loses one of their best generals, a man by the name of Stonewall Jackson. Now, how did he get the name Stonewall? Well, because supposedly in battle he stood there like a stone wall and wasn't afraid of the volleys, aka the shots, being fired around him. Now, Jackson is actually killed by friendly fire, and this is going to be a major blow to the South because the next major battle is Gettysburg. Now, Gettysburg is a turning point where the North starts to win. Now, Gettysburg lasts over 3 days, and the leaders of the armies are, of course, Robert E. Lee for the South, and for the North, it's a man by the name of Hooker. Now, Hooker is a new leader, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. I don't remember his first name, but it is a 3-day battle. He orders everybody to retreat so they can actually come into formation, and when he does that, they end up on this hill. Well, there's this one guy from New York who shouldn't have even been there. He actually is the first man to get off with murder by claiming insanity. And once he did that, he decided he wanted to join the Union, but they didn't want him, so he funded his own regiment. And he ends up charging into the South. And when he does, he kind of exposes the northern flanks, and the South tries to take advantage of it. But Hooker is very quick at responding, and The battle continues on. In the end, it's going to be a Northern victory. One of the biggest things to take from this, though, is the fact that you have two Maryland divisions, one in the north, one in the south, fighting each other. And it's brother versus brother pretty much at this point in time. So you have, the story goes that there were two brothers on opposite sides, and one of them saw his brother get shot. And since the Maryland divisions knew each other, they actually stopped fighting each other to help the wounded. Now, the bloodiest battle of the Civil War is, of course, going to be Antietam, aka for the South, Sharpsburg, for the North, Antietam. Now, Antietam's battle plans were actually stolen from Robert E. Lee's coat pocket. And once they stole the battle plans from his coat pocket, they were able to see what he was going to do. Of course, this is another Union victory. But I'm going to end it here. So if you guys want me to talk more about a battle or a point in history, please leave a comment below. Please like this video so I know to continue this series. And please subscribe if you already haven't. I like to make history fun. So have a wonderful day, guys.